if you don't have the equipment you need and you're facing a more challenging adversary, that's possibly putting folks at risk as well?
Senator, I'll take it from the modernization piece first. I think first and foremost, the risk is not winning, not being able to complete the mission in the future environment. Again, against the backdrop of what we're seeing in Ukraine, with the changing character of war, that has, I call it a version of symmetry and asymmetry. Symmetry being all the things, and certainly the Russian Federation had, that any nation needs to go to war, tanks and missiles and airplanes and helicopters, and then asymmetry, where Ukraine did not have that and has imposed costs on the Russian Federation through all things that we're observing, institutionalizing, and operationalizing. I think we're taking risks there, and that risk is about winning. It certainly has a force protection component to it, because if you're unable to get through the contested and congested battle space of integrated air missile defense, radio frequency spectrums knocking your things down, electronic warfare, there is a force protection component for sure to that. And I look at both. But I think it's both of those in modernization. In deterrence, I think it's more about aggregated risk. Us not being able to fulfill the parts of a campaign plan or no plan that the combatant commanders absolutely would rely on. And that probably at some point has aggregated risk for his end states and certainly their operations. So I'll start with information operations are absolutely critical. You know, there's a sense of you may not win a war with information operations like you could with artillery, or
right.
You can certainly lose it if you're not a key part of that and putting out the messages. And I would offer, I think, as the United States of America, we've got a great message to tell. And my sense is that there is a void. You mentioned misinformation, disinformation by any adversary. There's a void out there that's not being filled by our message. I think we take it certainly in Special Operations Command with our information ops professionals to really work at that in concert with our, more often than not, our country teams, our embassy country teams, to put those messages out that assure populations or reassure, and also at points in time deter adversaries. That is also part of the information operations space. Mm-hmm. So thank you for the opportunity to comment. We are in an era of serious national security challenges. The border, communist China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and terrorist organizations all pose significant threats in isolation. However, we're increasingly seeing these threats converge across the globe. Meanwhile, the changing character of war is changing at a rate faster than we've ever seen. The innovation cycle now turns in days and weeks, not months and years. Our adversaries use $10,000 one-way drones that we shoot down with $2 million missiles. That cost-benefit curve is upside down. To summarize, this is the most complex, asymmetric, and hybrid threat security environment I've seen in 38 years of service. Contending with these challenges demands more from your special operations forces. That requires tough choices, forcing trade-offs as we strike to balance an increase in operations, readiness, and the need for modernization. Your elite Socom team provides an outsized return on any investment. However, with only 3% of DoD's forces and less than 2% of DoD's budget, we are now playing a zero-sum game. Yet I'd submit your special operations forces are tailor-made for this era, rapidly responding to crisis, disrupting terrorist organizations, and asymmetrically deterring our adversaries. Employed expressly at the direction of the President and the Secretary of Defense, Socom's crisis response mission is the nation's most lethal and surgical tool to eliminate threats to the homeland, rescue American citizens, protect our diplomats, all at a moment's notice. In the past 3.5 years, the frequency of these presidentially directed missions significantly increased by 200%. Yet for this sacred obligation, we will accept no risk in today's crisis response mission. Some may think we're done fighting terror. I'd submit terror is not done with us. Socom's mission to degrade terrorist groups starts at our border, spans the globe. In recent months, your special operations team eliminated over 500 terrorists who had the intent and capability to strike the homeland. Alongside our global special operations partners, we've captured over 600. Aligned with the department's priorities, deterrence has long been a part of Socom's DNA. We are America's irregular warfare experts. We deter war by altering our adversary's decision below the threshold of conflict, in the gray zone. We stand ready to prevail if deterrence fails. As combatant commands seek to strengthen deterrence, requests for Socom capabilities have increased by more than 35% the last 2 years alone. Against that backdrop, we continue to grapple with years of flat budgets, a 14% decrease in buying power, significant personnel reductions, and the requirement to evolve our technology and authorities. All of this forces trade-offs, tough choices that challenge current missions and puts modernization at risk. Yet Socom remains the world's premier special operations force. I pledge to always provide the nation with the best special operations capability for the fiscal and personnel resources we receive. We will never compromise on standards and lethality. We are grateful for this subcommittee's work on novel approaches to soft funding and authorities. I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Return on investment our nation gets from our special operations forces is not only measurable, it is absolutely unmatched. Despite those reductions, SOF continues to do what it does best. It's adapting, innovating, and overcoming. So, General Fenton, can you speak to how SOF is adapting its training pipelines to enable future operators to integrate high-tech capabilities like AI, cyber, and electronic warfare more effectively?
Senator, I can. I would start by saying I think you know your SOF very well in terms of that we innovate, and I like to think we innovate for today and we modernize for tomorrow. And as we think about tomorrow, that's certainly through the lens of the lessons learned that we're watching vis-a-vis the events in Ukraine. And I think it's more important to not just observe those lessons, but as you laid out, institutionalize them. I think in the instance of institutionalization of those lessons, I would offer U.S. Army Special Operations, RSOF, has undergone two what I think are pretty significant efforts against these changing character of war. First is they've created a brand new course, the Remote Uncrewed Systems Integration course down at Fort Bragg, a course that is about a 6-week program of instruction, bringing together everything from learning how to build the drone, fly drones, and then certainly adapt them as we have seen on the battlefield. The second thing they've done, I would characterize in terms of institutionalizing, is they've created a brand new military occupational specialty, or MOS, or job title. And that job title is Remote Systems Integrator. And they've created that around the backdrop of a Special Forces warrant officer, a Green Beret warrant officer, and after their training is complete, a multi-month program of instruction, they'll go back to the Special Forces groups and start to really take that as a master trainer and weave it into all group training. You would see that across many of our components, but I think, Senator, those are a couple of the examples I'd want to give you.
General Fenton, from an operational perspective, how would further force reductions impact SOF's ability to respond to emerging threats in regions like Indo-PACOM, Europe, and, of course, the Middle East?
Well, Senator, I would offer right out the gate that would absolutely hurt. It would hurt fairly significantly, especially against the backdrop of, I think, over the last three and a half years, we've seen a 5,000 person teammate reduction inside of Socom already. And that's against the backdrop of communications, logistics, intelligence, civil affairs and PSYOP, and of course, operators. I think all of those are the type of capabilities that you see combatant commanders, as I mentioned in my opening statement, asking for more and more to the tune of about 35%. And I think that would absolutely impact that. We're already forced to make tough choices. And trade-offs. Those would certainly those would amplify those tough choices and trade-off and really put us in a place where I mentioned earlier in the statement, we're already at a zero. Small teams, small footprints, big impact is the way I like to think about it. And I think that starts with the fact that in our DNA is partnering. And SOF is known as a premier partner force. That's what we do across the globe, and maybe even today to the tune of about 7,000 folks in about 80 different countries. It's all about beginning partnerships. And those partnerships then evolve into trust. And once you get trust, then we're able to do everything, build partner capacity, develop some level of competency and capability. And I think it just goes on from there. And even do exactly as you just described. Bring folks together who otherwise may not be together. And I think at the end of the day, amplify capability and capacity for any combatant commander or for the Secretary of Defense.
Thank you, General Fenton.
A lot of us on the committee are very worried about Taiwan and a potential problem with China over the next few years. I'm the co-chair of the Taiwan caucus, so we think about this a lot. Can you give me your best assessment of what our security assistance activities there, our training? Maybe we have to go into classified session, but would appreciate, your role in deterrence, understanding the role you're playing in that issue.
Senator, we'll absolutely have to go into a closed session to provide details. What I would offer is that in support of Indo-PACOM, you would see your special operations forces doing many of the missions you described earlier. Certainly always being prepared for crisis response inside that AOR through our theater, Special Operations Command, Special Ops Command Pacific. That is a sacred obligation. I think you would also see us in a counterterrorism way, making sure that any CT threats, in this case ISIS East Asia, we're doing in a partnered way with teammates in that region. And then I think you would see us certainly in deterrence. And the way we present ourselves is presence is placement and access. It builds relationships and partnerships and capability, and all that I think is very valuable to San Paparo, any COCOM commander, because it provides options and opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have, and dilemmas and challenges to the adversary.
General Fenton, how would you characterize the demand and requirements for Special Operations Forces, particularly in crisis response? It's General Fenton.
Senator, first, thanks for visiting our forces, and thanks for allowing us to be in the great state of North Carolina.
Our honor.
Appreciate all the hospitality there. I know all our forces do. I would offer, in my opening statement, I laid out a couple. I think in terms of crisis response, we have seen a pace and a scale and duration that I frankly have not seen in my 20 to 30 years in the special operations community. It is called on more, so there's a requirement that's gone up by 200% in the last 3.5 years. That's on or about 15 missions where we've been asked to get out very quickly and do the type of missions that I mentioned. Either recover diplomats, protect an embassy, or at some point maybe even recover a U.S. citizen. I think I don't anticipate the world to get any less volatile, and that looks like a pattern to me. And so I think that demand has certainly gone up. In deterrence, the combatant commanders have asked for special operations in the last 2 years at an increase of about 35% to do the type of missions that they're looking for us to do that could involve anything from partner-based training to unilateral operations that would give them additional opportunities and advantages, maybe an unfair outsized advantage, and give the adversaries a bunch of dilemmas and challenges. So I think I anticipate that going up. And then I just mentioned earlier, terrorism is not done with us. And I think we absolutely have to stay focused on the threat that ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Al-Shabaab pose. And all three of those missions are absolutely in soft wheelhouse. I think that question is at the heart of something the Command Sergeant Major and I think about every day. That's risk. And I think in this case, that risk is a combination of operational risk. Do we have the capability and the capacity? And then for the first time, certainly in my memory, fiscal constraint risk. Can we actually do it? I think that drives to the heart of, I've had to say no in some instances in deterrence where I feel like I am taking risk almost 41 times in the last year to combatant commanders that would want special forces operational detachments, so 12 Green Berets, folks who may want command and control nodes, and I could go on and give you additional examples in a closed session. But I think it's certainly way too often, and my sense is that, first, that is risk. We're not meeting the combatant commander's demands in a special ops peculiar way. I'm also taking risk in modernization. And in a sense, I feel like I'm saying no to the Socom enterprise when we don't have the top line increase and the budget needed to modernize not only technology, but certainly our humans. So we think about education for an uncertain world. That's modernization. And on top of that, certainly even our authorities. So I think I say no way too much, and then those two categories, to combatant commanders in deterrence, and frankly to where we need to be as a Socom enterprise to win tomorrow, just like we've been winning today and in the past years.
Have you seen the benefits of this empowered senior civilian-like secretary?
Senator, absolutely. I think this will be my third time at this table saying how critical it is, how much we appreciate the work this Congress has done in that arena. I think the first thing I offered you before, and maybe even yesterday, and thank you for the office call, was that having Secretary Jenkins at the service secretary tables, along with the SecDef, representing special operations and SOCOM issues is critical. And I think about that on the service side of the SOCOM organization. Also advocating for issues that support our service members, our civilians, and our family members. And those run the gamut. Certainly the Human Performance Program, preservation of the force and family, and many other items that we have inside of our enterprise. I would also offer in terms of thinking through modernization and certainly transformation. So I think there's a great deal that we've been able to achieve together as a team of teams in the SOF enterprise.
Can you say if SOCOM has received adequate support from the center and that it's been an asset to your operations?
Senator, I'm not from the center.
From the center.
Senator, I think certainly, as we've thought through it, I go back to Secretary Jenkins' piece. We absolutely, as your SOCOM team, always aim to do the mission, especially in the kinetic ops that you're referring to, and then protect non-combatants and civilians as part of who we are and what we stand for. And I think, to your point, that sends a very powerful message across the globe that we're there to eliminate or disrupt a bad actor, yet at the same time protect innocents and vulnerable and non-combatants. That's a very different signal from a nation. And that's what your SOCOM team works to do every day.
And so with this flat budget, then where have you assumed any additional risk because of budgetary and personnel constraints?
Senator, I'd actually offer two places. In the operational arena, we've assumed risk in deterrence. As I mentioned in the opening statement, I'll assume no risk in crisis response today. That is a sacred obligation. And as we go across the spectrum in deterrence, as I've laid out, there have been instances where I've had to say no to combatant commander requirements because of operational risk and fiscal constraints in a way I haven't seen before. So first in operations, deterrence. Second is in modernization. Working to have the SOCOM team, and at times tying it to the Joint Force for sure, be able to win in the future environment like we have won for years and years and years in an increasingly contested and congested environment. We're taking risks there. The inability to get after the things I think that are asymmetric, that are part of the changing character of war, do it at speed. You could add anything uncrewed, artificial intelligence, additive manufacturing, autonomy. All that, I think we're accruing high risk because we as SOCOM are not able to get after that based on a flat top line on 5 years, $1 billion in lost buying power. That is reflective of that 14% lost buying power. We do irregular warfare, and our components and our operational elements know it. They go back to the SOCOM headquarters or geographic combatant commanders. What I would offer is I think it's always worth relooking because of the pace of the world and the way the world's changing in all type of levels. And I talk about modernizing authorities. And I think it's always good to keep an eye on things so we're not complacent, or even as we think about technology, how fast it's moved. My sense is there's certainly a need to relook authorities to make sure that they have not stayed stagnant or they have moved as fast as we need them.
Okay, well, I might want to have a conversation, an ongoing conversation with you, General, and for as long as I can, Mr. Jenkins, about how we could perhaps make the coordination better in this area. We're intruding on the time, Madam Chair, but let me just say, there's been a 35% increase from the COCOMs for your capabilities in the last 3 years. Is that right, General?
That's correct, Senator.
And 170% increase in SOCOM crisis response missions, including but not limited to hostage rescues.
Yes, sir. In fact, we just updated the numbers after we got a chance to see it, and I think today I reported 200% in 3.5 years.
Okay, all right, so instead of 170%. And then manpower cuts of nearly 5,000 personnel in recent years. How have those come about?
Well, Senator, a couple things. I think they're through the lens of the defense planning scenario and the work that the service has to do, along with the department, against any potential scenario, and I'll leave it at that because we could talk more in a classified session. My sense is that services took a look at the lens that they were given through those scenarios and came away with, we don't need X number of SOF. And over time, my sense is that that continued certainly to gain traction in the department. And as a result, I think you're very aware of a point last year where Secretary of Defense Austin made a decision to reduce SOF by 3,000 people.
Well, have these crisis response requests gone unanswered?
Senator, that
Everything you're facing with the lack of funding and
Sure.
the lack of purchasing power and
Yeah.
cuts of 5,000?
As I said in my opening statement, crisis response is the one place that I'm taking no risk. So we put everything we have against the crisis response today because our sense is that is a sacred obligation, presidentially directed, SecDef directed. We cannot fail.
And so the other things that you might put behind those crisis response things might be, for example?
Senator, I feel like we're absolutely taking risks in two places, modernization and deterrence. Deterrence would be that mission that we are taking risk in. And we're taking risk because, in my sense, we are unable to answer the combatant commander's requirements to the level that they have requested and certainly need. And when I look at that, that is risk to them and certainly risk to your soft forces. And that we're bringing the value that we could be bringing to the combatant commands in preventing great power conflict and certainly preparing for it.
One other thing, Madam Chair. I just hope the General understands the committee's position on both sides of the dais, that we need to hear fully from you on your unfunded requirements. Tell us what you need, be honest about it, and we'll try to get it for you. But we have found that some places within our defense establishment, they're reluctant to actually be honest with us about all the requirements that remain unfunded. And thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair.
Understanding is that many of those were enablers for the Military Information Support Operations, or MISO. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
And I am concerned about our ability to compete in those information operations. We had a hearing in the Foreign Relations Committee at the beginning of the year where our China experts said that China is spending $1.1 billion a year on information operations, disinformation, misinformation. And right now, we've completely dismantled our humanitarian and foreign aid presence in the regions where China has a foothold. We don't have anybody in charge of information operations across, as far as I can tell, now maybe we do and I just don't know about it, across defense, state, and the administration. And the president just fired General Hawk, so the head of Cyber Command. So help me understand how we're able to compete in the information arena when we don't have anybody in charge and when we've lost a lot of our people who are doing that work.
Yes, ma'am. In terms of that who's actually in charge and in coordination for the Department of Defense, that would fall by default to my organization because I support the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, who is the principal information operation advisor to the SecDef. And so we do have a coordination body and ability to do that, and I have a full-time team that's organizing and actively engaging with the combatant commands in terms of funding, also in messaging, and then they work outwardly with our state and agency partners so that if one agency is going to employ a message or an information operation, it's adequately coordinated with the other so that we don't have fratricide.
So if China's spending over $1 billion a year on their messaging strategy, how much are we spending in the Department of Defense on our messaging strategy?
Ma'am, I'd have to get back to you with that specific number. But what we are doing is we're trying to make sure that we are good
Is
stewards.
it fair to say we're not spending $1 billion a year?
Correct. Yes, ma'am, that is fair.
Significantly less.
Significantly less. We are
And-
trying to be smart with every penny, for sure.
But
ma'am.
it's not likely that we're able to match the operations that China's doing, despite our intention and the fact that we think we can do it better, because we don't have the infrastructure to do that. We've dismantled our Global Engagement Center at the Department of State. We're dismantling Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, all of the media that we've relied on really since the Cold War to get messaging across to accurately reflect the position of the United States against our adversaries. So, again, I would ask you, General Fenton, do you think you have, should we be doing more to resource those information operations?
Special operations forces in Syria, because the U.S. and Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, they share an interest in preventing an ISIS resurgence in northeastern Syria. Any escalation in the region, which is Turkish-backed Syrian National Army, and the central government in Damascus engaged military with the SDF would lead to instability that we know ISIS could exploit. That is extremely concerning, as is the possibility that such instability combined with destabilizing efforts from Iran and its proxies could cause SDF personnel guarding ISIS prisons and displaced persons camps to leave their posts in order to defend their territory. This would open the door to the possible escape of captured ISIS fighters and their families, as we saw that just play out in 2019. So, General Fenton, given our soft partnership with the SDF and the Defeat ISIS campaign, including security training and assistance, what are SOF and the SDF doing to prevent breakouts from SDF-run prisons and displaced persons camps to ensure that captured ISIS fighters and their families do not return to the battle space? I know this is a question that geographically pertains to CENTCOM, but our troops performing these counterterrorism missions are special operation forces.
Senator, I think the very first thing we do is partner with our SDF partners. It's almost a decade now, and I can get back and certainly provide written on the record how long we've done it, but I think it's about a decade, is disrupt, degrade, and work to defeat ISIS in Syria. It's a threat, certainly to the United States, as we've laid out before, and many of the committees have come before you have talked about it. But I think the first thing we do is disrupt and degrade ISIS along with SDF counterparts. That certainly vectors into protecting the prisons and the camps. And I think that, if you look at it, that's keeping improvised explosive ISIS bombers from attacking those, creating a level of, or opportunities for breakout. That is taking action in places that may not be close to the camps, but we know have planning going on in the camp. So I think there's many things your SOF team is doing along with our SDF partners to, first and foremost, and that is the mission, disrupt and degrade and diminish ISIS as per the CENTCOM and SecDef direction, and also protect those camps from a breakout and a prison as well.
Thank you. And I'm going to direct this question to both of you, staying on the same topic, because how does a continued elimination of ISIS leadership, and which SOF you have accomplished time and time again, impact ISIS' ability to plan and carry out attacks on U.S. forces and SDF-run prisons and displaced persons camps? And what are we doing more specifically to degrade Iranian-aligned militias from attacking or attempting to attack U.S. and coalition forces? And Mr. Jenkins, we can start with you and go on to the general, please.
Thank you, ma'am. And we see all those problems clear-eyed for sure. And thank you for sharing that concern with us. As General Fenton alluded to, looking at what SOF can control, what we can do in this space, that we take that very seriously. We are at the leading edge to make sure that our SDF partners can maintain control of those prisons, that they can repatriate where appropriate and when possible, so that we can decrease the population of potential breakout and under difficult situations. And then in terms of decreasing malign influence, we have to make sure that, similar to China, that we are deterring wherever possible. whether it's at the level of armed conflict or below with irregular warfare. We have the ability and lots of tools across the spectrum to make sure that we are deterring them from being in the battle space where they want to be and where they're trying to be.
Thank you. General Fenton, anything to add?
Senator, I would offer on the ISIS piece, I think is very important, as you've alluded to keep the pressure on ISIS by degrading their leadership, their the operationally experienced personnel, the communicators, financiers, all of these things come together for attacks not only in the Middle East against our forces, and that is force protection as we take it, but also in Europe and against our homeland. ISIS is an ex-ops threat. So I think that is the multiple responsibility for your special operations teammates. Not only ISIS, Al-Shabaab, and Al-Qaeda, but getting after these layers is very important to keep any of those terrorist groups from being able to plan and execute an attack on the homeland.
Thank you. I'll yield back, but I'm going to actually ask a question for the record about the Houthi relations with Al-Shabaab, so I'm glad you brought that up because it's critically important we discuss that as well. Thank you.